Welcome, everyone, to DEI After 5, the show that focuses on topics across diversity, equity, and inclusion with some of the brightest minds in the industry. Here's your hostess, inclusive culture curator and coach, Sacha Thompson.
Hey everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of DEI After 5. So for many people, when you talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, they're focused on race or gender or sexual orientation. And those things are so important. But one of the communities that is often left out of the conversation is the disability community. And if you have watched the show or listened to this show for any time, you know that disability is something that I always want to highlight because it is often overlooked. And so today, my guest is Dr. MJ McConner. She and I are going to have a great conversation about this around disability and some of the things that organizations can do to make sure that it stays on the forefront. Dr. MJ, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to be here today. Thank you.
I'm so excited to have you. So for folks that may not know who you are, can you tell us a little bit about who you are, your background? Like, how did you get into this work?
Yes, absolutely. So I am a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant. And so I've been in the DEI space actually for over 14 years, and I worked in higher education prior to becoming a full-time consultant. And, it's interesting because I actually started in the international education sector in higher ed, and then kind of moved over into DEI work. And then as I continued to progress throughout the workforce, I just noticed over time, I was like, we overlook disability inclusion quite a bit. Like, we don't have enough conversations about disabilities. And so that's why I just became really passionate about it, because I recognized that it was an area that it needs more focus and we have to have more conversations about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, it's so funny because I started in higher education as well, too. It's like so many of us come from higher education into this space and into this work. And it's interesting because when I first started doing this work, and I worked in the Office of Multicultural Affairs as an undergraduate, and that was probably one of the first times where I was very cognizant of disability as a part of the conversation or not being a part of the conversation. Right. At that time, it was really put into, okay, well, that's the accessibility office. Right. That's where that conversation takes place. But it's not just yes, accessibility is a part of it, but that's not part of the inclusion aspect of this. So can you talk to us a little bit about, why was this such an important topic for you to tackle?
Yes. So I will tell you, it's part personal for me as well. So me being in the workforce and me being in education and recognizing that it's overlooked was one thing, but also I am dyslexic and I am a member of the hard of hearing community. So I can only hear in one ear. And all my life, I remember, having conversations about, okay, well, if there's a way you can conceal that you're dyslexic, maybe don't share that. It make it harder for you as you go into the workforce. And even that, like when I look back at those conversations, I'm like, no one should be made to feel like they can't be
you have to hide it.
Or have to hide it, right?
Yeah.
And so just, from the very beginning, I always had this lens of, okay, how do we create accessible spaces for people, just because of what I had to experience personally as well. So it's a very deep personal connection to it. And then, it's just something that I think, like I said, that we have to have more conversations around and just creating more awareness so we can do better in terms of accessibility.
Absolutely. I've had some other guests on the show talking about disability and what organizations can do. And one of the challenges that's come up several times has been, organizations thinking about physical disability, thinking about putting ramps in, thinking about, and not that they should not have those conversations, but when you look at the statistics, a majority of people that are part of the disability community have invisible disabilities.
Correct.
And so what are we missing out on when we don't have these conversations?
Yes, and I'm so glad you brought that up, because there's certain numbers out there that suspect, like, oh, this number of the population may have invisible disabilities, but the truth is that number is probably actually much higher, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it's underreported because of the stigma that goes along with it oftentimes. So I think one of the biggest things that workplaces can do is start by creating a space where you're having those conversations and helping to dismantle and break the stigmas. Because like I said, for a long time, I went throughout my career like, okay, if I can hide this, if there's a way I can keep this to myself without my employer knowing, or maybe only the HR department knowing, then I'll be good. And a lot of people have that mentality as well, because they know, like, there is a chance that I may have certain, I may experience certain biases because of it. But when we actively work to make sure that we're having those conversations and we're creating spaces that are truly inclusive and equitable, then that's a good start. Like, you have to start though by recognizing that it's a problem.
Yeah. So I want to back up a minute,
Okay.
because I don't know if a lot of people even realize or understand what invisible disabilities are.
Yes.
Right. So can you kind of provide us with a framework or an understanding of what are invisible disabilities?
Yes. So invisible disabilities are disabilities that are non-apparent. So for example, I talked about being hard of hearing. That is something that you will not know unless, we have a conversation about it and I disclose that to you. Same thing with dyslexia. So most people who have a disability, like you mentioned, it's going to be non-apparent. It's not something that you can see immediately, because a lot of times when we think of disability, we think of physical disabilities. We think that, oh, this person's in a wheelchair, or they may need a ramp. But we don't always think about, oh, this individual has identified as neurodiverse. So how do we create a welcoming space for that individual, right? Because we automatically think of physical accommodations and creating accessible work environments in terms of the physical space. We have to think about other ways to create accessible spaces as well.
I'm taking a pause because my wheels are turning in my head right now. And it's turning because we're seeing so many conversations. At least I'm seeing a lot of conversations right now around neurodiversity and this push and call for having more conversations around neurodiversity, particularly in the workplace. I want to partner that with many adults of a certain, and I'll say probably adults in their 40s and older, have never been diagnosed, or very few have been diagnosed with having some type of neurodivergent disability.
Yes.
And so I'm trying to think through, like, so many people have struggled in the workplace, and yes, we need to talk about it. But if there's someone that has never been diagnosed, but people are seeing some of the symptoms, or they're seeing some of the challenges, how do you even merge those worlds or those conversations together?
Mm-hmm. You know what? I'm glad you mentioned that, because that is something you have to take into account, right? When you think about multi-generational diversity, for example, you think about Gen Zers and what might be acceptable for Generation Z. It might not be something that maybe baby boomers or Gen Xers or even millennials have conversed about.
Right.
Like I said, I came from the education space. I would hear my students like, oh yeah, I'm on the spectrum. So that's why it takes me.
Right.
They would be so open about it. Whereas, some of the members of older generations, maybe they didn't have those conversations, and maybe they just didn't have the same level of awareness and access to do formal assessments, like you said. So that is something we do have to recognize. I remember someone once reached out to me and she said, MJ, I need your help, because we have a colleague who's really difficult to work with. And a lot of us suspect that he could be on the spectrum, but we don't know for sure. He's never identified as being on the
Right.
spectrum, being autistic. How do we handle this? Right. And that's a reality for a lot of employers and a lot of people, in different organizations. You're not going to always know because that person may not know themselves. They may have
Yeah.
never been formally diagnosed, but you still have to operate with an inclusion lens. And you want to be careful too, because you don't want to diagnose a person without,
Right.
especially if you're not a licensed professional. But it's still important to kind of have that awareness. Like, okay, I see that my colleague, he works better when we do this, when we have really clear directions. So let's make sure we're giving him real clear directions. Don't use a lot of slang and idioms, and that's just one example. So it's important for us to kind of have that lens and say, all right, we recognize that the person may or may not have been diagnosed, but we still have to be inclusive in how we engage.
Absolutely. I mean, we all learn in different ways. And so just being mindful of that, how we take in information, how we
Mhm.
interact with the world around us is all very different. And so, when I think of earlier in my career, when folks would say, oh, that person's just odd, like they would just kind of dismiss it versus, okay, they learn in a different way, or they communicate in a different way. So how can we make sure that they're getting the information that they need in a way that is meaningful to them? Right. So it was how do you become much more accommodating in that? And it's funny because I have two friends that are part of the DEI world, both within the last year have been diagnosed. I mean, they're again 30s, 40s, being diagnosed within the last 2 years of being either ADHD or being on the autism spectrum of some sort. And so that's even jarring, right? To go through your life, your adult life, knowing, okay, I just do things my own way. And then now saying, oh, okay, there's a name for this.
Yeah.
Right.
Can,
Yeah, go.
is it okay if I respond to that? As you were talking about that, you're absolutely right. And I have heard time and time again, so many people say, yeah, I didn't get diagnosed until just last year. And
Right.
they might be in their 30s, 40s, sometimes even 50s. But what I'll tell you, what I've seen too, is that for a lot of people, it has been like, oh, it all makes sense now.
Eye-opening.
It
Yes.
has been this eye-opening experience. And that's why I always say, like, if you do suspect that you might be ADHD or you may have some form of neurodivergence, then get tested. Even if you've gone through your entire life and you've never been formally tested, it's never too late, because it does bring a certain level of clarity as to why maybe you process things differently or you
Yeah.
prefer to work differently. So yes.
So that brings two questions to me. One is, what resources, or do resources that people can tap into if they suspect, that they may be on the spectrum or have some type of neurodivergent background?
Yeah, and so there's different resources out there, and there are actually specific organizations that advocate for neurodiversity in the workplace, and then they have like various places where you can get tested. And so I don't have like the different places where you can
Right.
get offhand, but there are organizations out there, and there's multiple organizations. One of the things too, let's say if you're a student in higher education, of course you have the accommodations office.
Mhm.
If you work, if you have not talked to like your human resources department about, and if you feel comfortable saying, are there resources out there, or is there something out there where I could potentially talk to someone and learn more about neurodiversity, they may have connections as well. Because I know more and more human resources departments are recognized and like, okay, this is something that we have to be mindful of, especially as our workforce becomes more and more diverse, is that we're providing folks with different resources where they can learn about different forms of neurodiversity and disability inclusion as well. So
That was actually going to be my second question. Are we at a place where organizations are noticing that they need to have these resources, right? Where they need to have this support. And I say that from that standpoint, but then also we're now in this post-pandemic kind of
yeah.
workplace where organizations are realizing they have to play a very different role in their employees' lives. And so it just kind of came to me that if we're not having these conversations in the workplace, is it because the organizations aren't thinking about it, or do they even have the resources and tools that they need in order to support these conversations and ensuring that individuals that have not been diagnosed yet know, okay, here's some options or some things that may be helpful to you. So I'm thinking out loud right now, but
Yeah.
that, it's part of this evolution of the world of work that
Yes.
we're starting to see. Go ahead.
Yeah, you know what? I will say it's kind of a range.
Mm.
It depends on the industry, because it's like, for example, we'll use tech as an example. In tech, I know has had a lot of issues with some layoffs and everything recently. But because a lot of times you see people with different forms of neurodivergence are drawn more to certain fields, you'll see higher rates of neurodiverse
Yeah.
folks within those industries, right? So, for example, tech, STEM,
Yeah.
and not to do a sweeping generalization. I mean, we have people in every sector, but there's some industries where it's more prevalent.
Yeah.
And so those employers are more likely to understand it. And they're like, oh, okay, we understand that Bill may prefer to work this way. He tends to do better when we're very, very specific, so, and that's why I say it depends on the industry, and some organizations really have made great strides around it. And I think there are a lot more organizations out there now that are at least starting to have conversations about it, that maybe they didn't have conversations before because they just didn't know what it was, right? There was not like a formal name for it the way it is now. So I feel like it's getting better, but there's still a lot of work to be done.
I agree. I absolutely agree. And having spent 10 years in the tech industry,
Yeah.
there were quite a few folks that I knew they were on the
Yes.
spectrum.
Yes.
They may not have known it, but
yeah,
I kind of figured it out. But I also think that there could be so much more, that can be done, and understanding. And again, not just picking on tech, across all industries,
right.
more, awareness is so important, but it's not just the awareness, it's the action, right? Yes, let's make sure that people are aware and they know what's happening, but then the action that we're taking as an organization to support this.
Mm-hmm.
Are we providing the resources? Are we providing the support? Are we providing opportunity, like discounts on testing? Because testing is not cheap.
It's not cheap. No.
So, are we providing those discounts? Is that part, or is that part of EAP? Is it part of any other programming that we're having? Is that part of the wellness in the workplace program? So, those are the types of things that I think about when I think, okay, what are we truly doing to make organizations more inclusive, and trying to include disability as a part of that conversation?
Yeah. And what I'll say too, and I love that you touched on like the EAP part and testing. Additionally, some other ways to make workplaces more neuro-inclusive is thinking about even something as simple as, is our interview process inclusive?
Mm.
We ask certain questions, or when we ask people to give examples, is this easy for folks to understand? Because some people, they may have anxiety, they may have different things. And so it's really important to use an equity lens on various aspects, because it's easy to be like, oh yeah, we got to standardize everything. Let's do just a standard interview. But you can be excluding some really great candidates if you don't think about how you go about it. The way you hold meetings is important. And just so many different areas.
Yeah. When you said that, it brings up, I do a workshop on inclusion, and it's a cartoon that has, okay, the test is, I want you to climb this tree, but it's like a monkey, a bird, a fish in a bowl. Like, it's all of these animals, and the test is to climb the tree. And I'm like, okay, is the test really to climb the tree, or is it to get to the top of the tree? Like, what are you testing for? Right. And so you can't give everyone the same test if they have different abilities.
Exactly.
And some will naturally excel, and others just won't be able to excel at all, like the fish in the bowl. Like, really? Mm.
That's exactly right. Exactly right.
So, yeah, that's what immediately came to mind when you said that. So Dr. Mary, what are some things that you recommend that organizations kind of start to think about or do? Sorry, I'm gonna step back. Dr. MJ, because we're gonna get,
High school.
I know your brand. I'm like, we're gonna get your branding right here. Dr. MJ, what are some things that organizations can do to start this conversation, or at least start thinking about what pieces do they need to have in place to begin to support these invisible disabilities?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say one of the first things is if you do have a DEI department within your organization, or let's say, equity and inclusion work falls within HR or some area within your unit, I would think is that it's really important um, for us to at least say, okay, look, we recognize that this is something that our organization needs to prioritize. What kind of opportunities can we provide our team members within the organization in terms of learning and development? Because awareness is always going to be key. Like, you have to start with, do people even know what neurodiversity is?
Mm-hmm.
Do people even understand what it means to be inclusive in terms of disability inclusion?
Yeah.
So definitely, I think that's key, is starting there. And then from there, you can start kind of assessing. Like, you can do an equity audit and say, okay, let's have somebody come in and look at our organization and really go through our policies and protocols and practices to see, are we truly being inclusive? It's like I said, there's certain things people don't even recognize because it's so normalized. Like, oh, I didn't recognize I wasn't being inclusive to folks with disabilities, or I didn't recognize that I wasn't being neuro-inclusive, when I did this in meetings. So that's why I think it's really important to have assessments as well. And it's really important to have somebody who understands how to do those assessments properly and equity audits properly. So that way they can give you some feedback on what you can change within the organization to become more inclusive.
When you were talking just now, what clicked in my head is it's really about next level accountability in these spaces, because there's so many organizations that focus on what are we doing to be compliant, right? ADA compliant, which focuses much more on the physical disability side of things than the invisible side of things. And so that next level is, okay, we've gotten the physical things taken care of. What are the other aspects of disability that we need to consider, and what are we going to do to fix, change, shift, so that everyone can be a part of this discussion or conversation? And so it really is going beyond just checking the box.
Yes.
It's that next level of work and analysis.
Yeah.
So Dr. MJ.
Yes.
This work ain't easy.
It ain't easy.
It ain't easy. What do you do to fill your cup? Like, what do you do to take care of yourself?
So I'll tell you what I love to do. I love to lay outside. I have a pool. We have a pool in the area. But even if it's not by the pool, even if it's in the park or just enjoying nature, it's something about being outdoors where I just feel like, okay, I can reconnect, I can journal, I can meditate, I can be at peace. Because like you said, it's important for us to be able to stop, especially doing this work, and just reflect and have that time for ourselves to fill our cup. I like that.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, if I could be, I'm trying to figure out how to put my office outside. We still have Wi-Fi and all of the things, right?
And control the weather. Like, okay, do not rain. I need you to
it's just the total side note, because I saw some when they did a greenhouse office, and I was like, oh,
that's clever. I like it.
I like that.
Yes.
I just got to figure out how to do it and not burn up in the summertime.
But I was thinking, I was like, it might get hot in there though, without like some kind of ventilation, AC, something.
I'm gonna figure it out. I'm gonna figure that out. But I'm with you. It's just something about connecting to nature, and I love water, so I'm feeling you there.
Yes,
absolutely. Well, Dr. MJ, thank you for joining us. If people wanted to follow up and get to learn more about the work that you do, how can they do that?
Yes. So it's a few ways they can do it. So my website is ieconsultingfirm.com. And also I'm really active on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is like my jam. So Facebook, Instagram are cool, but my favorite is LinkedIn. I'm posting every day articles and, different things on there. So feel free to follow us on LinkedIn. It's my first and last name, Mary McConner. And then you can look up the company name, Inclusive Excellence Consulting, and follow us, the company, on LinkedIn as well. So yeah, and then we are on Instagram. We do posts. We do like our DEI Mindset Monday posts along with some other things. So that's Inclusive Excellence Consulting on Instagram as well.
Wonderful. And do you have anything else that's happening or going on that we need to know about?
You know what? This has been an interesting year. Like it's a lot happening in the DEI space throughout the nation. But I will say this is that what this has kind of shown is that there are people out there like, we don't care what's going on. We still want to do this work. And so for me as a consultant, that has been reassuring. Like, okay, there are people who are still like, we still want to do this and we
Absolutely.
still want to become more equitable and inclusive. So this has been good. I think we're in an interesting time, but there's still a lot of people who are committed to the work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Dr. MJ, for being with us today. I'm sure that everyone has kind of taken away a few nuggets that they may not have considered as they're doing their DEI work. So thank you. Thank you. And thank you all for watching and listening and being a part of this episode of DEI After 5. As always, you can find us here every Tuesday at 5:15 p.m. Eastern on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. And until next time, have a good one.